All right, welcome to Unstuck with Hydroware Wellness Lab, the podcast where real people share the real stories behind getting their lives, their bodies, and their mindsets back on track. I'm your host, Brett Hunt, and in every episode, we dive into powerful conversations with athletes, weekend warriors, health and wellness professionals, and everyday people who refuse to settle. These are the breakthroughs, the setbacks, the mindset shifts, the moments that get us unstuck. So today I'm joined by someone who has played a really big role in my life the last year or so in my own health journey, Vanessa van der Linden. Vanessa is a certified nutrition specialist or a CNS, and she's the founder of Nourished Functional, where she specializes in functional and integrative nutrition. She works with clients to uncover the root causes behind their issues, hormone imbalances, metabolic dysfunction, and chronic fatigue, instead of just managing symptoms. She holds a master's degree in integrative and functional nutrition and helps people understand their labs, their bodies, and their health in a deeper way. And something that I really appreciate about her is there's no like one size fits all type of a thing. It's all very personalized for the individual. So with that, Vanessa, welcome to Unstuck. Thanks for taking some time.
Thank you. So excited to be here and talk to you today.
Awesome. So Vanessa, before we dive into health and wellness, your specialties and all that, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? What do you like to do? All that. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in Southern California in the Inland Empire. I'm now in Orange County, not far from that, but closer to the beach, which is beautiful. I'm married to my husband, and we have a beautiful chocolate lab, Akira, and she's really our baby. Um, I love to cook. I love being active. Love just being with people and being part of just the wonderful community that I have. And food just plays such a huge role in my life through cooking and nutrition and just so many different things in that arena.
Awesome. So with that, with you mentioned cooking, have you always been interested in cooking? Like since like at a young age, was cooking something that you always liked doing, and that's kind of what helped you get into nutrition as a career?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think from probably the age of like 4 years old or something, I wanted to be a chef. Like I wanted to have a restaurant. I wanted to go to culinary school. I grew up in a home with parents from Ecuador, so we were very just into food, into cooking, into eating. That was just such a big part of like our family culture. And everyone in my family loves to cook and loves to eat. And so it definitely has always been a big part of my life.
That's awesome. So when did you, so you mentioned at 4 years old, that's when you said where you had all these dreams to be a chef and all this. So
Mhm.
what was it that drove you to then do what you do? Like in college, was there a class you were taking that you decided, okay, I want to dive in deeper in these types of arenas, or what led you to where you are now?
Oh man, it's definitely been a journey. I would have never expected to be what I would have never expected to be doing what I do now, even in my undergrad. So, throughout my childhood, going into high school, thinking about what I wanted to do in college, I knew I wanted to go that like culinary restaurant route. And so that's what I ended up going to school for. I went to Cal Poly Pomona here in California for hospitality management. And so, I got some training in restaurant management, and culinary, and all that. And I had considered nutrition and getting a degree in nutrition. But I think what had stopped me, because even though I was researching a lot on my own, just because I was so fascinated by it, I just didn't love the curriculum. Honestly, I didn't love the path. I was not super aware at the time as much of the functional world, the integrative world. And so it just didn't feel like a fit. So I kind of left it to the side and continued with hospitality management for a few years until I was working in it for a few years and could just continue to develop my passion for nutrition just with my own health, own research. Like I just could never get enough of it. And I realized I want to go back to school. Like this is, I think, it's adjacent to what I'm doing, but Working in restaurants ultimately is just it was not a fit. And that's when I went back to get my master's at Saybrook University, and have not looked back since.
How did you find out about Saybrook? Like, how
Mm,
did you get into that
honest
world?
oh,
Because
man,
that's not one I've heard of, right?
yeah, I just Googled the heck out of it. I was just like, "Where do I learn this?" Like, I mean, there's not a
Mhm.
ton of I mean, it's growing, right? But there's not like it's not at every school. So I think I was just doing all the research that I could. I wanted a virtual program, so, it ended up just being a really good fit. I had considered some other options, but all in all, I loved the curriculum. I loved the blend of, like, integrative and functional, together and just the path that it would naturally lead to be a CNS. So yeah.
Did you know what a CNS was before you went to Saybrook? Like, or before you started Googling all that, or was that something you just happened upon during your research?
Yeah, I did not know about it until I just knew that I wanted to go back to school to learn integrative nutrition. Like, that's all I knew. I had no
Mm.
idea what that would really look like. I didn't know the path, and so I in the process of applying to schools and things like that, that's when I really learned, okay, like, do I wanna be an RD? Do I wanna be a CNS? All these different paths, and that's when I really had to consider what it is that I wanted to get from a degree, from an education, and so that's when I learned about CNS.
So, kind of diving a little deeper into that, because you mentioned, you were looking at different things, RD, CNS, and all this. So, what is a CNS, and what is the difference between that and an RD or other professions that might do something similar?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely not as well known, so a lot of people don't, always I mean, I didn't know what the difference was. So, registered dietitian, and a CNS path, is somewhat similar. Now RDs are required to have a master's. That's pretty new. I would say, I think in the last couple of years, they were only required to have a bachelor's, whereas CNS, we need to have a master's. But now they're actually pretty quite similar. But I think it's what the actual education and curriculum is and what it is setting you up for. So an RD is going to be more of a broad path where you can work inpatient and really critical care. You can also work outpatient and preventative. I mean, it really sets you up for quite a broad path. The education is still very evidence based, but sometimes it is a little bit more, conventional, right? It's a conventional
Mm.
nutrition and diet approach. Whereas a certified nutrition specialist, so we need to have a master's in nutrition, 1,000 hours of supervised practice experience, and we need to pass an exam. So similar, but the actual curriculum and education is focused towards personalized nutrition. That's really the key. And it's, I knew I was not interested in working in a hospital or like acute critical setting. I knew I wanted to focus on prevention, chronic illness, things like that. And so this was a perfect path where I didn't need, I would have needed to be an RD to work in an inpatient setting. I knew that was not where I wanted to go. And as a CNS, it's, again, the focus is personalized nutrition. It's not necessarily functional nutrition, but they naturally go hand in hand because when you learn personalized nutrition, you're taught to be able to assess someone's health really comprehensively, order and interpret labs, be very well versed in supplementation, in nutrition. And again, not a blanketed, like everyone needs to be on this one diet, but really learning um, how to help people as individuals and all the things that go into it. Um, I have seen just some colleagues in the space that have more of the RD background get additional education to learn more about the integrative and functional side of things. So I think you can definitely be an integrative and functional nutritionist with either credentialing. But I just think that the CNS education is kind of more built towards that. It kind of naturally lends itself to more personalization.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that's something that I really do enjoy about working with you is that everything is very personalized, and it's not just a one size fits all shoe. So it's
Yeah.
very personalized. Like my protocol is very different than other protocols that you might write.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that about your guys' profession.
Mm.
So with that, one of the things also that you guys kind of do, and you kind of touched on, is getting to the root cause of things, right? If there's an issue that someone's dealing with, it's not, oh, well, this is the broad spectrum of things that people with this issue do. So here you go, try that. Hopefully it works for you. Let me know if it doesn't. Was there something like an experience in your life, an injury or something that you had that made you decide, yeah, I want to help people get to the root cause of their issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, yeah, and this goes back to kind of the whole journey of even finding integrative and functional nutrition, going down that path. So, I grew up in a home that I think we were like above average healthy, right? Like we would try to
Hmm.
like not do the sugary cereals and not drink soda, but it was still, we were also like an American family that had way more processed food than we needed to, didn't totally understand labels and all these types of things, but we were like a generally okay, healthy family, right? But,
Hmm.
when I was 9, my dad got sick, and he, was having different gut issues, different metabolic issues, and was dismissed by doctors. He went and got things checked out, and kind of was just sent away of like, you're just having like stomach ache or whatever, kind of sent back. Um, Unfortunately, over time, he developed acute pancreatitis, gallbladder stones, ended up in the hospital, and eventually passed away, and at 10
I'm
years
sorry.
old. And so that was obviously a very pivotal moment for me and just experience that's shaped me in my whole life in so many different ways. But I think one of the ways that it's shaped me the most is that I think as I grew older, I just wanted to understand like, why did this happen? He didn't have cancer, he didn't have this chronic issue that we knew of. All I knew was he went to ask for help and he was dismissed, and the worst thing happened. And that's not the case for every single person, but it was for him. He was in his early 40s. Again, we were like a kind of normal American family, above average healthy, right? And I just
Hmm.
couldn't make sense of it. And over time, as I started dealing with some of my own symptoms, not, thankfully nothing severe, but just, in high school, noticing the fatigue, breaking out randomly in hives, having really disruptive and painful periods, like just different things like that, where uh, me and my mom, and we were just kind of like, okay, what? This has to be food related, right? Like there has to be more to this. So we would do research. She was really fascinated in this world too, so we were kind of learning together. We started to change our diet a little bit, just not as much processed food, not as much refined sugar. I stopped getting hives. Periods got better. I had better energy. Like just these changes started to happen. I think that that just grew over time, especially working in restaurants for a few years there, where that is a very high stress environment. It is Oh, I
Yeah.
just feel for everyone who does work in restaurants still, because that's the world I was in for 10 years. Not having regular breaks, just, I mean, and I was in management, so I was so highly stressed and I felt that in my body. And that was around the time where I was like, man, I think that there is more to health. I think there's more to nutrition. And the more I dive in, I was like, oh my gosh, food is medicine. That was the realization. It's like, food is medicine. There's actually so much potential in taking ownership over our own health. And I just kept thinking about my dad, of just like, if he had been heard, if he had had maybe his own education, or just maybe connected to the right people who maybe thought about health and wellness differently, I know for a fact that he would have been able to prevent those health issues. I know that with certainty. Um, and I think that experience really is driven, the initial driver for me of, I I want to prevent things for myself, even of just like, I want to
Hmm.
live a life that feels, where I feel good in my body, where, I'm not going to pretend that I'm never going to have a symptom in my life, right? We're human. We're always going to deal with stuff. But if I am able to do something proactively, I'm gonna do it. And then when I realized, oh my gosh, I can help people do this. I can help people prevent from going down the path that my dad did, or even just things like that was experiencing, like the hormonal issues or skin issues. I thought that that was just like what's more empowering than that, right? Being able to decide, I'm gonna eat differently, I'm gonna move differently, and then be able to live a life that's more you're more at peace in your body, right? So, anyway, I could keep talking about that for a while, but that's my main driver. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, first off, I'm sorry that you lost your dad at such a
Mhm,
young age. That's
mhm.
gotta be hard, and I
Appreciate
feel
that.
for you. I'm sorry. Um, but what a cool thing that you've been able to take that and now you can say like, look, I know what could have helped him, right? I know, like you said, like for certain this would have helped him. So then you can go and help someone else so that they don't have to experience that. And I'm sure that he is looking down at you and he's so proud of you. So that's awesome. Really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So now that you know you went back to school, you have your driver, and um, you get your degree. You go back to school and you get it. Did you open your business right away? Like, is that what you did coming right out of school? Like, I'm not sure. Like, are there CNS like practices where people like work underneath a certain person or all that, or are they all just like out on their own?
Yeah, I think a large majority of CNSs do have private practices. I think that's a really common path. But a lot of CNSs will also work in integrative and functional practices as well. That can be common. So for me, part of what I kind of mentioned earlier of becoming a CNS is having to get 1,000 hours of experience. And so that's part of what drove me to start seeing clients through my own private practice. But I've also worked in other clinics. So I wanted to gain as much experience as I could. And so I slowly just started seeing clients gradually on my own. I originally started my private practice as nutrition with Vanessa. It eventually shifted. It's the same thing, really, but it's just a different name to Nourished Functional. It encompassed my ethos a little bit more. But I also was able to gain some experience by working in just a community health clinic, which was very conventional, not integrated or functional in any way, but it was incredible experience to work with the just the population I was working with, a lot lower income, a lot more chronic metabolic conditions. So that was great experience. I've also worked in functional medicine clinics, where, that's a very different set of population. I got to learn so much about, and just gain my confidence in functional lab testing and working with really complex issues, working with other like functional physicians. But all throughout that time, I had my private practice. And so that was kind of just slowly, gradually growing. And now I'm about like 4.5 years in of having my practice.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome! Congratulations,
Mhm.
that's amazing.
Thank you.
What's been the hardest thing about being a business owner? Uh, You know, for you, what's been the hardest thing about
Oh,
having your own practice and all that?
yeah. Well, I I think that it's the business side of things, really. It's, the caring for clients, meeting with clients. Like I can do that all day, every day. It's my favorite. It's the most life-giving thing. I love it. Um, Marketing is hard. The financial aspect of it is hard. I think that I've gotten a little bit better at this, but it's always been hard to um realize that I have to charge for my services. I really wish that I could everything was free. Truly. I just wish that I could help everyone and it was all free, but I have to make a living too. So, I think that that's been a learning curve for me as a business owner, is just being like, hey, it's okay to, this is part of having a business. Part of having a business is marketing yourself, right? And being on social media and all of that, which is truly not my favorite thing. But I try my best, and it is just part of it. And so it's gotten a little easier over time. But that's probably the part that I enjoy the least. And I just want to hang out with my clients.
That's I hear you. I am not someone that enjoys being like posting on social media or anything.
Yeah.
If you saw my personal account, people would probably wonder, like they probably have no idea what I'm up to. But if
Oh,
they look at our
same.
business
Yeah.
account, then here I am, right? And it's funny. I mean, I just and like you said, it's a necessary thing to do, but it's
Yep.
definitely not something
Hmm.
that I like ever saw myself doing either. So
It's been because
but
I
that's
converted my personal Instagram account to my business account, like,
mhm.
several years ago when I started this, and I realized even when I had a personal account, I never even posted about my wedding or anything. Like, I just was not ever someone who was, like, I'm like, I, like, didn't even post about stuff, and now I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have to post 3 times a week or every day," or so it's such a shift.
Yeah, it really is. It's crazy how important something that small can be. But that's
Mhm.
awesome. 4.5 years in, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned being a CNS? Like maybe that you had I'm sure you had an idea like as you're going through school, this is what it's going to be like. You're shadowing people, you're seeing how they're doing. Been the biggest lesson that you've learned as a CNS being out on your own?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think. Um I've just learned so much. I mean, honestly, it's I am always learning. I think that when I was in school, I felt like everything was simpler than I realized. Like I was like, okay, like it's actually not that hard. Everyone just needs to like eat more whole foods and all that. And I think that while part of me still sees that as true is that there is a simplicity towards nourishment, there's also such a complexity. And I think that I have a lot more compassion towards people and my clients than maybe when I was like in school because I've seen that there's a lot that is working against our bodies with stress and genetics and toxins and poor food quality and our, just cultural pace of life. And it can be complex. And I think that's where lab insights are helpful, where supplementation can be a great tool, all these different things. Um and so I think it's sort of this, like, realization, this, like, balance that it is both simple and complex, and for some people, it's more complex than others, and with that too, I think it is having the humility to realize even as a clinician that I can't heal people. Like, I am not, I can't change someone's experience in their body. I am here to guide and cheerleader them on. Um, Only the person who is doing the changing, like you are in charge of your own body, right? Like, and even then, there's so much in our control, and then there's a lot that's not. And so part of what I've had to learn too, in this role of being more of this guide and this coach is that and I kinda mentioned this earlier, is that, like, life is always lifing. We have human bodies. We're going to experience hardship. We're gonna experience symptoms from time to time because we're living, again, in all of this burden and stress, and so the goal is not perfection, right? Like, the goal is not to never ever feel bad, you know? It's recognizing our tools, like, personally, right? That's where that complexity ties in is, like, we all have to just recognize, "Okay, like, these are the tools that help me," and use them and lean into them and adjust as your body needs adjusting, right? And tending to your body, and so that's such a maybe complicated answer, not super straightforward, but I think that that's what comes to mind.
Hey, cool. That's awesome. Okay, so now I want to kind of dive into kind of more of the things that you do for people, like what you focus on and things. And you mentioned it with your dad, and I'm sure you've seen it meeting with lots of people in your practice. A lot of people will come, and I'm sure you've heard this story, just like, I have this is going on in this, and no one can tell me what's wrong. They just tell me, well, you look fine. Everything's fine. It's all in your head. I don't, they just can't figure out what's wrong. So why do you think so many people fall into that cycle of like these band-aid solutions that aren't personalized for them specifically, or they've tried certain things and they just don't work. Why is it that our society or people fall into that trap a lot of the time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think that it is our it's the model of medicine that we have. Um, I am not against Western medicine at all. Like, I think there's absolutely a place for medication. We are so lucky to, live. I'm so lucky to live in, a place that I have access to good medical care, acute care, and all these things. But that's the thing is that a lot of our medical education for doctors and physicians is based on um, it's treating the symptoms or it's managing the symptoms, managing prevention of acute situations, not necessarily optimal wellness, right? Like that's not how it's designed. I think even just with the way that insurance works and everything, right? It's also just we don't get a lot of time with our doctors, right? We don't a lot of us don't have regular relationships over time where doctors really understand our bodies and they don't have the time, right? We have 10 minutes with them, if anything, which is just not enough time to educate. And I think too that again, part of the education for a lot of doctors is, and this is, I think, starting to change, but they're not nutritionists. They're not getting nutrition education. They're getting amazing, wonderful education that is beyond my scope. I mean, that's I'm not a doctor, and I so respect what incredible knowledge they have. But they're also not nutritionists, right? And I think that, if you think about all the schooling and experience and everything that dietitians and nutritionists have to go through, you see that it's a lot of time, right? And it would that would shift things quite a bit. So I think when people are struggling with their symptoms, usually the first place to go is they go to their doctor, right? And depending on who their doctor is, they might only get a limited blood panel. They might just be offered maybe one or two solutions that include more like symptom management, like medication. They probably are not spending the time to go in depth of seeing, well, why is this happening in the first place? What is your lifestyle like? What's your nutrition like? Um, I think we have a lot of access to information through the internet, and I think that can be very helpful. But it's also a lot of information on the internet where some of it's helpful and some of it's really not.
Mhm.
And so that can be more overwhelming than helpful most of the time, I think, for people, especially with social media, with influencers and all of that. So I think people feel overwhelmed, right? They go one path to their doctor, they have limited solutions or solutions that they tried that haven't worked. Then they, look on their own and they research and they go on social media and it's just overwhelming information, even if some of it's good. And I think that that's what gets people stuck, you know?
I would agree with that. I really liked that answer. I think there's so much information that sometimes we just get paralyzed a little bit and we don't know what to do,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's tons. So with that, what are some things that are very common? Not everyone's the same, but what are some things that are like common things that you see amongst your patients that are quote normal and that they think are normal and they just dismiss them, and then you see them and you're like, well, actually that's not normal, and if you just fix this one thing you would fix so many other things. What would you say that would be?
Oh, I I might have to give you a few. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
that's a
that's
that's a
fine.
hard one to boil down, but um I think there's a lot of things. I think for women specifically, like reproductive age women, I think it is really terrible periods and like PMS. I think that that's one of the
Mhm.
biggest things that's normalized. And people are like, oh, well, yeah, I just, doesn't everyone just feel awful and, have like debilitating cramps and mood swings and all these things? And it's like, well, yeah, it's common, but that is a sign that the body is saying, like, I need some help. In the gut health side of things, I think constipation's a really normalized one where I have a lot of people that will say, well, oh yeah, I, have a bowel movement every 3 to 4 days. I thought that that was normal. By the way, that's not normal. You're supposed to have bowel movement 1 to 3 times a day, well formed. And so if you're not, that's a red flag, but not everyone realizes that. Unless it's accompanied like with pain, which sometimes it isn't. I think the other thing I'll just mention one more is low energy and fatigue. I think that uh I think it's like a cultural, experience to just be tired all the time and sort of this, like, badge of honor of, like, busy and tired and just caffeinated, and I think that, normalizing fatigue, is one of those things where actually, we're that is another sign that the body needs tending to, that it's needing something. And while it can be normal to, be tired here and there, of course, when we're living in a state of fatigue where you cannot function without like 3 cups of coffee, even if you're getting good sleep, that's one of those signs.
I will say that that is one badge that I proudly wore for a while until I until I started working with you, so I can relate. I can relate to that for sure. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right, so and then what are some mistakes that people make when it comes to their nutrition that they might think, because like there is a lot of information, and so
Mhm.
they think I am eating healthy when, and you see what they're eating and you say, well, you're eating better, but what you're doing is not actually very good.
Yeah. I think there could be a lot of different things. I think that there's always going to be diet trends. There's always something, right? There was a big, probably like more when we were kids, it was like the low fat craze. And then, then we had the opposite where it was high fat craze and keto. And then right now we're in the protein craze. And like, I think that while I'm such a big fan of a higher protein diet. I think a lot of people undereat protein and it's so helpful. I think the hard thing is that now there's so many processed foods that are being marketed as high protein, yet still full of a lot of processed ingredients, whether it's like artificial sugars or artificial additives and things like that. And I think that that's where sometimes unfortunately, I think things are just marketed to be healthier than they are, and so, I would say, most of my clients, I feel like, come in one of the things I always ask is, "What protein powder are you using?" And majority of the time, it's full of just ultra processed ingredients that are so damaging to the gut and other aspects of the body, and they think that they're doing good. And so I feel for them because it's the marketing. But I think it's sort of we're still somehow most of the time straying away from whole foods. Whatever the craze is, but I think it's the whole foods that we need to come back to.
I will say that that was one of the things you told me too. Like, yeah, that protein powder is probably not a good thing for you to be taking. Let's look for something else. So that's awesome. All right. What
Not
would you
alone in that.
say? Yeah, it's true. What would you say the biggest misconception about eating healthy is? Like when you talk to people about, hey, let's change
Mm,
your diet. What's something that they, just aren't very well
mm.
educated on about that?
I'm gonna say 2 things. I think one thing is I think people think it's a lot more complex than it needs to be, like the meal itself, and I think that people get really overwhelmed, understandably, that it's like, "Oh, man, like, I just don't think I have, the time or the energy to make this healthy meal." It feels like you're gonna have to, like, cook from scratch and all these different components and suddenly become, like, this home chef. But I think that that is a misconception because I think that you can actually make very nourishing, nutrient dense, balanced anti-inflammatory meals that are really quite simple. And so that's like one of the things that I give to my all of my clients is I have this Nourishing Food Foundations guide, which is actually available to the public. But I have, instead of just one meal plan for someone, I have three different variations of meal plans that take no time, which is basically just assembly that takes 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes, so you can make the meal in like less than 20 minutes, and then 30 minutes or more. But I think people assume it's all going to be like 30 minutes or more. So then when I show them, actually, like you could just assemble a meal using there's some convenience products that are actually really good quality. Like the more and more time goes on, I think that we're getting access to better quality convenience foods. And so you can make a meal assembling good quality components that actually makes it so doable, right? And I think that then people feel less intimidated and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, okay, I can fit this into my busy schedule. And so I think that's one of the big ones is sort of that just it can be simpler. Um, can I say one more?
Yeah, of course.
The other one I'd say, 'cause the question is about sort of like, misconceptions, right?
Hmm.
Is that I think people think it needs to be like healthy eating is like just a Mediterranean diet. And while the Mediterranean diet is one of the most well studied diets to be so supportive for so many things, for cardiovascular health, for reducing inflammation, for gut health, so many things, I think that people then don't think that they can eat a variety of other cultural foods. And that's one thing that I think that matters a lot to me, even being, coming up from a Ecuadorian, South American family is that, and, I have clients that from all different cultural backgrounds. And I always try to meet people where they're at of like, no, you can actually make, again, really nutrient dense, balanced, beautiful, delicious, healthy meals in any cuisine and culture. You don't need to just eat this like Mediterranean palate. That's one of the things that we learn a lot in school in my master's program is traditional diets like the Okinawa diet, blue zones, all these things where you can see that geographically, there's going to be differences in naturally the produce and the proteins that people eat in different cultures. But it all kind of boils down nutritionally to okay, you're still getting protein, you're still getting fiber, you're getting polyphenols and antioxidants. But I do like sharing that with people so that they know, if they love those cultural foods from what they grew up with or where they're from, like you can lean into that. It's just about sort of maybe getting creative with the quality of ingredients you're using or just the combination or portions of things. So, wanted to mention that one as well.
That's awesome. What's your favorite Ecuadorian dish?
Mm. I love a plantain. So plantains
Okay.
are a very common staple there, of all types. So plantains can be sweet or savory depending on their ripeness. But my
Hmm.
favorite is when they're more savory, more unripe. And so there's these things called patacones that are sort of like sliced plantains, which you can think of as like a green banana that are
Hmm.
cooked and smashed and a little bit of oil. So I usually do it with like avocado oil, like or like in an air fryer to get crispy so it's not like deep fried. And you just sprinkle it with some salt and lime. And they're just like these crunchy plantain chips, but they're not like chips, they're like thicker. Anyway, those are delicious. I love those.
That's awesome, and it sounds like I imagine that's not how they typically make them, right? I'm sure they're probably deep fried or something,
Yeah.
or do they typically make it that way?
So it's not like deep fried, but it's twice shallow fried. So it definitely
Okay.
traditionally uses a lot of oil. But I've kind of found my own way to cut that down where it's like still gets the crispiness from the oil, but it doesn't need to be so saturated in oil. I
Mm.
also just love plantains are such a good like gluten-free, grain-free carb and so high
Mhm.
in resistant starch, so good for the gut. So again, one of those things that are so health beneficial just depending on the way you prepare it, and it's delicious.
I kinda wanna try that now, so
I'll send you a
I'm gonna
recipe.
have to go yes. Alright, so you kinda mentioned it a little bit ago, um, there's all these crazes with diets, right? There's the keto diet, there's high protein carnivore diet, there's low fat diet, all these stuff. What would you say is probably something, because you meet with a lot of different people, what's the most common diet that you see that people have tried? And what do you think most people are forgetting when they try these different diets? Is there something that's common amongst all these things that is being neglected? And that's
Mm,
maybe why it's not working for them.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that when I just think about the clients I have that I've seen over the years, I think probably well, actually what else so keto is a common one. I think that I've definitely had a lot of people that have tried that diet. I think the other thing, which is not maybe so much a diet, but a sort of a way of eating is gluten-free, dairy-free. And I'll probably talk about that one because I think that it can be, so beneficial for certain people to remove those types of foods that, they often feel a lot better in their gut, they can feel a lot less inflamed, maybe skin improvements, things like that, and so there's definitely this, like, time and place where I think that can be such a good fit for people. I also think that, I've seen a lot of people where they, um, they are gluten and dairy free, and yet they still have quite a lot of symptoms, and they think, "Well, what else do I need to remove?" Like, okay, if it's not that like, we're just kind of thinking of foods as bad and harmful of like, "Okay, well, now I need to go grain free, and now I need to do this." Like, what's the culprit of these symptoms, particularly gut related or inflammation related? And I think where, um I like to talk about this a lot is that it's the food is not the issue most of the time, especially when we're talking about whole foods. Obviously, ultra processed food is going to be really hard to digest, very hard on the body in a lot of ways. But if we're talking about really good quality dairy, for example, a lot of people just have gut issues where they are having difficulty digesting dairy, or maybe they have microbiome imbalances that are making it really challenging to to accept those foods, and the gut is very irritable. So I think that often those foods can be demonized, where instead of that, I want to help people think about, well, what environment is that food coming into? And over time, a lot of people are able to reverse food sensitivities. Um, where they kind of come in thinking, oh my gosh, I need to do a food sensitivity panel, find out like what foods I'm sensitive to. But it's I like to kinda reframe that and think about it in a different way. So, that's one that's a pretty common one, particularly I think in the integrative and functional space, where some, nutritionists might practice a little bit differently than me. They might focus a little bit more on restrictive diets and, um, recommend more like elimination diets and paleo and AIP and things like that, where I take approach that's much more cautious when it comes to elimination. I definitely it's something I use in my practice, but it's not. It is done usually very gently, very phased, so that ultimately the goal is trying to get the body to be resilient enough to actually accept a variety of whole foods, rather than having to avoid, if not necessary.
Cool. Is there a nutrition myth out there that you hear a lot that just drives you crazy? And if there is, what is it? And why is it not true?
Hmm. I mean, honestly, I think it's what I already shared about, like, the Mediterranean diet being, like, the only diet to follow, or, like, it's kind of this, like, one size fits all of or, like, "Oh, everyone needs" maybe it's not even just that. I think it's the one size fits all thing, right? Whether it's
Mm,
someone saying, "Oh, well, no one should ever eat gluten," or "Everyone, needs to eat this way," or no one it's the absolutes. I think that's what,
mm,
is one of the most frustrating things because uh, again, it's we all need something a little different. I do think that there's some core principles that most humans benefit from, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, eating a diet that's supports blood sugar balance, that supports gut health, that's colorful and anti-inflammatory. I do think that, I kind of think about those four principles as being the things that are going to be the most helpful for most people in their overall health. But I think that can look differently, right? There's so many different foods that are available that can take the form of a Mediterranean diet. It can also take the form of a paleo diet or just all sorts of different things. So I think that that's what I would say.
Very nice. Couple more questions with this. So one of the things that we've done, at least with me, is I'm on, quite a bit of supplements, to help balance things back out. Would you say, like overall, like not your clients, but overall, like as a population here in the United States, are we overusing supplements? Like, do you see people that come to you that are just overusing supplements and that are not necessary? Or are we as a population generally underusing them?
I think that we are underusing them and misusing them. For the most part. I definitely get someone here and there that's you can tell has been, in the functional world for a while that will come in with way too many supplements. I do see that, and they just have, like, a huge supplement graveyard of, like, things that they've tried over the years and, but I wouldn't say that's the most common route because supplements are also very expensive, right? They can be, and
Mhm.
so I don't think that that's, economically, the majority for what's normal. So I think that a lot of people actually underuse them or misuse them. So what I mean by that is that I do have a lot of people that do come in taking supplements or just people in my life that I know that like they're taking an omega, they're taking a vitamin D or some common things like that, or maybe they're taking a creatine because they've heard it's good. um but a lot of the times, supplements, they're not all created equal. What's really going to make a difference in whether a supplement is helpful or not is quality, dose, timing. Unfortunately, a lot of supplements out there are they look a lot better than what they actually are and they're actually quite ineffective. I'll take omega-3s as an example. I see a lot of people come in with like Kirkland brand omega-3s that have like 2 to 300 milligrams of omega-3s where really a therapeutic dose is like 2 grams, and things like that where people
Mm.
are thinking, okay, I'm taking a good one, but it's sort of this misuse because they don't know. I think also with the underuse, I think that supplements can be such a wonderful tool. I don't think it's a non-negotiable. I think that again, there's definitely people that economically it's just not a fit. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so I love being able to modify supplement plans based on the person and what is in their budget. But I think that if there is an openness to it, supplements can be game changers, right? They can really bridge gaps for nutrient deficiencies as you're healing. We can use herbs as a gentler approach to correct things like bacterial overgrowth and having to use antibiotics that are going to be a lot more harmful systemically to the body. Ultimately nutrition, lifestyle, all the foundations is most important. But when you're already in a state where your body is quite out of balance, it can help you feel better quicker and get more in balance when you're using some of these tools. Always done with guidance, with knowing your full health assessment, with having labs to back things up. Big fan of retesting labs to make sure is the supplement actually working, right? Do we need to change anything? Yeah, that's what I would say about supplements.
Awesome. Okay, one more question for you before we wrap up. Um, Title of the podcast, Unstuck, right? I think unstuck is something that a lot of people can relate to, whether it's stuck health-wise, stuck financially, spiritually. There's so many levels in our lives where we could feel unstuck. But I think health is one of those things that a good portion of the population struggles with. They just feel like they've tried all these different things that just aren't working for them. So, what would you tell someone that feels stuck with their health? What would you tell them should be the first thing that they do to help them begin the process of becoming unstuck?
Yeah. Um, I love that question. So I do think a lot of people probably resonate with that, and probably a lot of people listening. And I think of going back to just simplicity and small steps. I think oftentimes when we feel discouraged, out of control, hopeless, I think there is a lot of the times a temptation to just want to like overhaul everything, right? I'm going to start a new diet. Okay, I'm going to start this new regimen. I'm going to like change my whole life tomorrow, or do the New Year's thing where you're, introducing a bunch of resolutions. And I think most of the time that doesn't work, right? Because it's not sustainable. I think in the long run, if what you really want for yourself is to feel good for good, right? Over sustainably over your life, and not just, kind of a quick fix, then it starts almost annoyingly small. I think sometimes it's like it's the boring stuff of you know what? Okay, I'm going to make the one small step to maybe it's focusing on breakfast. And okay, I'm just going to focus on introducing more protein at my breakfast. Or, actually my small step is going to be, I'm going to reach out to a provider that might be more of a fit, right? That might listen to what's going on. Maybe it's okay. My one small step is I'm just going to like move my body for 1 minute a day. Like it's things that sound almost like too small. Like, how could this even help? But when you start there, then you get easy wins, right? Then it's okay, I've accomplished something. Okay, like our brains love dopamine, right? Like, and so if we can
Mhm.
give our brains that little hit of like, no, you did it, then it's like, okay, like let's chase that feeling. And you're gonna start to notice that with these changes, whatever it may be, noticing then in your body of like how you're feeling is then gonna be that motivation of, "Oh, okay, this was worth it. Like, I wanna, keep doing, this thing that's good for me." So it's this combination, I think, of starting small and then noticing in your body. 'Cause I think too, like, sometimes we also, on the flip side, maybe we're trying to be focused on healthy habits, and then we indulge, or we do the thing that we didn't want to do or that we used to do, and then we
Mhm.
give up because we're like, oh well, I failed, and I failed, what's the point? And I think when we notice without judgment, then we can see, oh, okay, I indulged. I actually notice that I'm feeling more fatigued. I'm feeling sluggish. Okay, I don't want to feel that way anymore. Okay, let's go back to starting small. Okay, I'm going to make this
Mhm.
little change. And that is that cycle of motivating, where when we disconnect from our body and just go by the rules in our brain, then it's pass fail. It's very intense, and it's hard to live that way. So I think it's, having compassion for ourselves, starting small and noticing.
I love that. Yeah, just kind of like a snowball, right? You just kind of
Yeah.
get it going with something small, and then it just can propel and get bigger and bigger and
Yeah.
bigger. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today with us. I really appreciate you coming on. So, real quick before I let you go, how can people that are listening or watching find you? The things that you've said have just touched them, and they're like, I want to be one of Vanessa's clients. I want to see if she can help me. How can they find you? How can they follow you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So Nourished Functional, so it's Nourished functional, .com, or Instagram at Nourished Functional. That's where you can find me and learn more.
Awesome. If anyone listening like this, if she said anything that resonated with you, I would give her recommendation 100 times. She's awesome. She really does care about her clients. She really does care about your success, and I would 100% recommend it. But thank you again, Vanessa, for joining us today. If this episode resonated with any of you guys, share it, hit subscribe, whatever you would like. But biggest thing I would appreciate is sharing it so that we can help other people that might feel stuck, unstuck. So again, thank you, Vanessa, and remember that progress begins with one step. We will see you next time.